Hello, welcome to another Monday's recording of Interview with the Vampire. I hope that you have had a good weekend. This part of the story is quite a long one, so without ado, let's settle down, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's get sleep-bound. Meantime, Lestat was after the slaves. He would leave such ruin and death behind him. No one could make a story of that night at Pointe du Lac, and I went with him. Always before, his ferocity was mysterious, but now I bared my fangs on the humans who fled from me, my steady advance overcoming their clumsy, pathetic speed as the veil of death descended, or the veil of madness. The power and the proof of the vampire was incontestable, so that the slaves scattered in all directions, and it was I who ran back up the steps to put the torch to Pointe du Lac. Lestat came bounding after me. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Are you mad?" But there was no way to put out the flames. They're gone, and you're destroying it, all of it. He turned round and round in the magnificent parlor amid his fragile splendor. "Get your coffin out. You have 3 hours till dawn," I said. The house was a funeral pyre. "Could the fire have hurt you?" asked the boy. "Most definitely," said the vampire. "Did you go back to the oratory? Was it safe?" "No, not at all. Some 55 slaves were scattered around the grounds. Many of them would not have desired the life of a runaway, and would most certainly go right to Frenières, or south to the Bel Jardin plantation downriver. I had no intention of staying there that night, but there was little time to go anywhere else." "The woman Babette," said the boy. The vampire smiled. "Yes, I went to Babette. She lived now at Frenières with her young husband. I had enough time to load my coffin into the carriage and go to her. But what about Lestat?" The vampire sighed. "Lestat went with me. It was his intention to go on to New Orleans, and he was trying to persuade me to do just that. But when he saw I meant to hide at Frenières, he opted for that also. We might not have ever made it to New Orleans. It was growing light, not so that mortal eyes would have seen it, but Lestat and I could see it. Now, as for Babette, I had visited her once again. As I told you, she had scandalized the coast by remaining alone on the plantation, without a man in the house, without even an older woman. Babette's greatest problem was that she might succeed financially, only to suffer the isolation of social ostracism. She had such a sensibility that wealth itself meant nothing to her. Family, a line. This meant something to Babette. Though she was able to hold the plantation together, the scandal was wearing on her. She was giving up inside. I came to her one night in the garden. Not permitting her to look on me, I told her in a most gentle voice that I was the same person she'd seen before, that I knew of her life and her suffering. "Don't expect people to understand it," I told her. "They are fools. They want you to retire because of your brother's death. They would use your life as if it were merely oil for a proper lamp. You must defy them, but you must defy them with purity and confidence." She was listening all the while in silence. I told her she was to give a ball for a cause, and the cause to be religious. She might pick a convent in New Orleans, anyone, and plan for a philanthropic ball. She would invite her deceased mother's dearest friends to be chaperones, and she would do all of this with perfect confidence. Above all, perfect confidence. It was confidence and purity which were all important. Well, Babette thought this to be a stroke of genius. "I don't know what you are, and you will not tell me," she said. This was true. I would not. "But I can only think that you are an angel." And she begged to see my face. That is, she begged in the manner of such people as Babette, who are not given to truly begging anyone for anything. Not that Babette was proud. She was simply strong and honest, which in most cases makes begging. "I see you want to ask me a question." The vampire stopped. "Oh no," said the boy, who had meant to hide it. "But you mustn't be afraid to ask me anything. If I held something too close." And when the vampire said this, his face darkened for an instant. He frowned, and as his brows drew together, a small well appeared in the flesh of his forehead over his left brow, as though someone had pressed it with a finger. It gave him a peculiar look of deep distress. "If I held something too close for you to ask about it, I would not bring it up in the first place," he said. The boy found himself staring at the vampire's eyes, at the eyelashes which were like fine black wires in the tender flesh of the lids. "Ask me," he said to the boy. "Babette, the way you speak of her," said the boy, "as if your feeling was special." "Did I give you the impression I could not feel?" asked the vampire. "No, not at all. Obviously, you felt for the old man. You stayed to comfort him when you were in danger, and what you felt for young Frenier when Lestat wanted to kill him. All this you explained, but I was wondering, did you have a special feeling for Babette? Was it feeling for Babette all along that caused you to protect Frenier?" "You mean love," said the vampire. "Why do you hesitate to say it?" "Because you spoke of detachment," said the boy. "Do you think that angels are detached?" asked the vampire. The boy thought for a moment. "Yes," he said. "But aren't angels capable of love?" asked the vampire. "Don't angels gaze upon the face of God with complete love?" The boy thought for a moment. "Love or adoration," he said. "What is the difference?" asked the vampire thoughtfully. "What is the difference?" It was clearly not a riddle for the boy. He was asking himself. Angels feel love and pride, the pride of the fall and hatred, the strong, overpowering emotions of detached persons in whom emotion and will are one, he said finally. He stared at the table now, as though he were thinking this over, were not entirely satisfied with it. "I had for Babette a strong feeling. It was not the strongest I've ever known for a human being." He looked up at the boy, but it was very strong. Babette was to me, in her own way, an ideal human being. He shifted in his chair, the cape moving softly about him, and turned his face to the windows. The boy bent forward and checked the tape. Then he took another cassette from his briefcase and, begging the vampire's pardon, fitted it into place. "I'm afraid I did ask something too personal. I didn't mean," he said anxiously to the vampire. "You asked nothing of the sort," said the vampire, looking at him suddenly. "It is a question right to the point. I feel love, and I felt some measure of love for Babette, though not the greatest love I've ever felt. It was foreshadowed in Babette. To return to my story, Babette's charity ball was a success, and her re-entry in social life assured by it. Her money generously underwrote any doubts in the minds of her suitors' families, and she married. On summer nights, I used to visit her, never letting her see me or know that I was there. I came to see that she was happy, and seeing her happy, I felt a happiness as the result. And to Babette, I came now with Lestat. He would have killed the Frenières long ago if I hadn't stopped him, and he thought now that was what I meant to do. And what peace would that bring? I asked. You call me the idiot, and you've been the idiot all along. Do you think I don't know why you made me a vampire? You couldn't live by yourself. You couldn't manage even the simplest things. For years now, I've managed everything, while you sat about making a pretense of superiority. There's nothing left for you to tell me about life. I have no need of you and no use for you. It's you who need me, and if you touch but one of the Frenier slaves, I'll get rid of you. It will be a battle between us, and I needn't point out to you I have more wit to fare better in my little finger than you in your entire frame. Do as I say. Well, this startled him, though it shouldn't have, and he protested he had much to tell me, of things and types of people I might kill, who would cause sudden death, and places in the world I must never go, and so forth and so on. Nonsense that I could hardly endure. But I had no time for him. The overseer's lights were lit at Frenier. He was trying to quell the excitement of the runaway slaves and his own. And the fire of Pointe du Lac could be seen still against the sky. Babette was dressed and attending to business, having sent carriages to Pointe du Lac and slaves to help fight the blaze. The frightened runaways were kept away from the others, and at that point, no one regarded their stories as any more than slave foolishness. Babette knew something dreadful had happened and suspected murder, never the supernatural. She was in the study making a note of the fire in the plantation diary when I found her. It was almost morning. I had only a few minutes to convince her she must help. I spoke to her at first, refusing to let her turn around, and calmly she listened. I told her I must have a room for the night, to rest. I've never brought you harm. I ask you now for a key, and your promise that no one will try to enter that room until tonight. Then I'll tell you all. I was nearly desperate now. The sky was paling. Lestat was yards off in the orchard with the coffins. But why have you come to me tonight? She asked. And why not to you? I replied. Did I not help you at the very moment when you most needed guidance, when you alone stood strong among those who are dependent and weak? Did I not twice offer you good counsel, and haven't I watched over your happiness ever since? I could see the figure of Lestat at the window. He was in a panic. Give me the key to a room. Let no one come near it till nightfall. I swear to you, I would never bring you harm. And if I don't, if I believe you come from the devil, she said now, and meant to turn her head. I reached for the candle and put it out. She saw me standing with my back to the graying windows. If you don't, and if you believe me to be the devil, I shall die, I said. Give me the key. I could kill you now if I chose. Do you see? And now I moved close to her and showed myself to her more completely, so that she gasped and drew back, holding to the arm of her chair. But I would not. I would die rather than kill you. I will die if you don't give me such a key as I ask. It was accomplished. What she thought, I don't know. But she gave me one of the ground floor storage rooms where wine was aged, and I'm sure she saw Lestat and me bringing the coffins. I not only locked the door, but barricaded it. Lestat was up the next evening when I awoke, Then she kept her word. Yes, only she had gone a step further. She had not only respected our locked door, she had locked it again from without. And the stories of the slaves, she'd heard them. Yes, she had. Lestat was the first to discover we were locked in, however. He became furious. He had planned to get to New Orleans as fast as possible. He was now completely suspicious of me. I only needed you as long as my father lived, he said, desperately trying to find some opening somewhere. The place was a dungeon. Now I won't put up with anything from you. I warn you. He didn't even wish to turn his back on me. I sat there straining to hear voices in the rooms above, wishing that he would shut up, not wishing to confide for a moment my feeling for Babette or my hopes. I was also thinking something else. You ask me about feeling and detachment. One of its aspects, detachment with feeling, I should say, is that you can think of two things at the same time. You can think that you are not safe and may die, and you can think of something very abstract and remote. And this was definitely so with me. I was thinking at that moment, wordlessly and rather deeply, how sublime friendship between Lestat and me might have been, how few impediments to it there would have been, and how much to be shared. Perhaps it was the closeness of Babette which caused me to feel it, for how could I truly ever come to know Babette, except, of course, through the one final way, to take her life, to become one with her in an embrace of death, when my soul would become one with her heart and nourished with it. But my soul wanted to know Babette without my need to kill, without robbing her of every breath of life, every drop of blood. But Lestat, how we might have known each other, had he been a man of character, a man of even a little thought. The old man's words came back to me. Lestat, a brilliant pupil, a lover of books that had been burned. I knew only the Lestat who sneered at my library, called it a pile of dust, ridiculed relentlessly my reading, my meditations. I became aware now that the house over our heads was quieting. Now and then feet moved, and the boards creaked, and the light in the cracks of the boards gave a faint, uneven illumination. I could see Lestat feeling along the brick walls, his hard, enduring vampire face, a twisted mask of human frustration. I was confident we must part ways at once, that I must, if necessary, put an ocean between us. And I realized that I tolerated him this long because of self-doubt. I'd fooled myself into believing I stayed for the old man and for my sister and her husband. But I stayed with Lestat because I was afraid he did know essential secrets as a vampire, which I could not discover alone, and, more important, because he was the only one of my kind whom I knew. He had never told me how he had become a vampire, or where I might find a single other member of our kind. This troubled me greatly then, as much as it had for 4 years. I hated him and wanted to leave him, yet could I leave him? Meantime, as all this passed through my thoughts, Lestat continued his diatribe. He didn't need me. He wasn't going to put up with anything, especially not any threat from the Freniers. We had to be ready when that door opened. Remember, he said to me finally, speed and strength, they cannot match us in that. And fear. Remember always to strike fear. Don't be sentimental now. You'll cost us everything. You wish to be on your own after this? I asked him. I wanted him to say it. I did not have the courage, or rather, I did not know my own feelings. I want to get to New Orleans, he said. I was simply warning you. I don't need you. But to get out of here, we need each other. You don't begin to know how to use your powers. You have no innate sense of what you are. Use your persuasive powers with this woman if she comes. But if she comes with others, then be prepared to act like what you are. Which is what? I asked him, because it had never seemed such a mystery to me as it did at that time. What am I? He was openly disgusted. He threw up his hands. Be prepared, he said, now baring his magnificent teeth, to kill. He looked suddenly at the boards overhead. They're going to bed up there. Do you hear them? After a long, silent time, during which Lestat paced, and I sat there musing, plumbing my mind for what I might do or say to Babette, or deeper still, for the answer to a harder question. What did I feel for Babette? After a long time, a light flared beneath the door. Lestat was poised to jump, whoever should open it. It was Babette alone, and she entered with a lamp, not seeing Lestat, who stood behind her, but looking directly at me. I had never seen her as she looked then. Her hair was down for bed, a mass of dark waves behind her white dressing gown, and her face was tight with worry and fear. This gave it a feverish radiance, and made her large brown eyes all the more huge. As I have told you, I loved her strength and honesty, the greatness of her soul, and I did not feel passion for her as you would feel it, but I found her more alluring than any woman I'd known in mortal life. Even in the severe dressing gown, her arms and breasts were round and soft, and she seemed to me an intriguing soul clothed in rich, mysterious flesh. I, who am hard and spare and dedicated to a purpose, felt drawn to her irresistibly, and knowing it could only culminate in death, I turned away from her at once, wondering if when she gazed into my eyes, she found them dead and soulless. You are the one who came to me before, she said now, as if she hadn't been sure, and you are the owner of Pointe du Lac. You are. I knew as she spoke that she must have heard the wildest stories of last night, and there would be no convincing her of any lie. I had used my unnatural appearance twice to reach her, to speak to her. I could not hide it or minimize it now. I mean you no harm, I said to her. I need only a carriage and horses, the horses I left last night in the pasture. She didn't seem to hear my words. She drew closer, determined to catch me in the circle of her light. And then I saw Lestat behind her, his shadow merging with her shadow on the brick wall. He was anxious and dangerous. You will give me the carriage, I insisted. She was looking at me now, the lamp raised, and just when I meant to look away, I saw her face change. It went still, blank, as if her soul were losing its consciousness. She closed her eyes and shook her head. It occurred to me that I had somehow caused her to go into a trance without any effort on my part. What are you? She whispered. You're from the devil. You were from the devil when you came to me. The devil, I answered her. This distressed me more than I thought I could be distressed. If she believed this, then she would think my counsel bad. She would question herself. Her life was rich and good, and I knew she mustn't do this. Like all strong people, she suffered always a measure of loneliness. She was a marginal outsider, a secret infidel of a certain sort, and the balance by which she lived might be upset if she were to question her own goodness. She stared at me with undisguised horror. It was as if, in horror, she forgot her own vulnerable position. And now Lestat, who was drawn to weakness like a parched man to water, grabbed her wrist, and she screamed and dropped the lamp. The flames leaped in the splattered oil, and Lestat pulled her backwards, towards the open door. "You get the carriage," he said to her. "Get it now, and the horses. You are in mortal danger. Don't talk of devils." I stomped on the flames and went for Lestat, shouting at him to leave her. He held her by both wrists, and she was furious. "You'll rouse the house if you don't shut up," he said to me, "and I'll kill her. Get the carriage. Lead us. Talk to the stable boy," he said to her, pushing her into the open air. We moved slowly across the dark court, my distress almost unbearable, Lestat ahead of me, and before us both Babette, who moved backwards, her eyes peering at us in the dark. Suddenly she stopped. Suddenly she stopped. One dim light burned in the house above. "I'll get you nothing," she said. I reached for Lestat's arm and told him I must handle this. "She'll reveal us to everyone, unless you let me talk to her," I whispered to him. "Then get yourself in check," he said disgustedly. "Be strong. Don't quibble with her. You go as I talk. Go to the stables and get the carriage and the horses, but don't kill." Whether he'd obey me or not, I didn't know, but he darted away just as I stepped up to Babette. Her face was a mixture of fury and resolution. She said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." And I stood there before her then, speechless, just holding her in my glance, as surely as she held me. If she could hear Lestat in the night, she gave no indication. Her hatred for me burned me like fire. "Why do you say this to me?" I asked. "Was the counsel I gave you bad? Did I do you harm? I came to help you, to give you strength. I thought only of you, when I had no need to think of you at all." She shook her head. "But why? Why do you talk to me like this?" she asked. "I know what you've done at Pointe-du-Lac. You've lived there like a devil. The slaves are wild with stories. All day men have been on the river road, on the way to Pointe-du-Lac. My husband was there. He saw the house in ruins, the bodies of slaves throughout the orchards, the fields. What are you? Why do you speak to me gently? What do you want of me?" She clung now to the pillars of the porch and was backing slowly to the staircase. Something moved above in the lighted window. "I cannot give you such answers now," I said to her. "Believe me when I tell you, I came to you only to do you good, and would not have brought worry and care to you last night for anything had I the choice." The vampire stopped. The boy sat forward, his eyes wide. The vampire was frozen, staring off, lost in his thoughts, his memory. And the boy looked down suddenly, as if this were the respectful thing to do. He glanced again at the vampire, and then away, his own face as distressed as the vampire's. And then he started to say something, but he stopped. The vampire turned towards him and studied him, so that the boy flushed and looked away again anxiously. But then he raised his eyes and looked into the vampire's eyes. He swallowed, but he held the vampire's gaze. "Is this what you want?" the vampire whispered. "Is this what you wanted to hear?" He moved the chair back soundlessly and walked to the window. The boy sat as if stunned, looking at his broad shoulders and the long mass of the cape. The vampire turned his head slightly. "You don't answer me," I'm not giving you what you want, am I? You wanted an interview, something to broadcast on the radio. That doesn't matter. I'll throw the tapes away if you want. The boy rose. I can't say I understand all you're telling me. You'd know I was lying if I said I did. So how can I ask you to go on, except to say what I do understand? What I do understand is like nothing I've ever understood before. He took a step towards the vampire. The vampire appeared to be looking down into Divisadero Street. Then he turned his head slowly and looked at the boy and smiled. His face was serene and almost affectionate, and the boy suddenly felt uncomfortable. He shoved his hands into his pockets and turned towards the table. Then he looked at the vampire tentatively and said, "Will you please go on?" The vampire turned with folded arms and leaned against the window. "Why?" he asked. The boy was at a loss. "Because I want to hear it." He shrugged. "Because I want to know what happened." "All right," said the vampire, with the same smile playing on his lips. And he went back to the chair and sat opposite the boy and turned the recorder just a little and said, "Marvelous contraption, really. So let me go on. You must understand that what I felt for Babette now was a desire for communication, stronger than any other desire I then felt, except for the physical desire for blood. It was so strong in me, this desire, that it made me feel the depth of my capacity for loneliness. When I'd spoken to her before, there had been a brief but direct communication, which was as simple and as satisfying as taking a person's hand, clasping it, letting it go gently, all this in a moment of great need and distress. But now we were at odds. To Babette, I was a monster, and I found it horrible to myself and would have done anything to overcome her feeling. I told her the counsel I'd given her was right, that no instrument of the devil could do right even if he chose. "I know," she answered me, but by this she meant that she could no more trust me than the devil himself. I approached her, and she moved back. I raised my hand, and she shrank, clutching for the railing. "All right then," I said, feeling a terrible exasperation. "Why did you protect me last night? Why have you come to me alone?" What I saw in her face was cunning. She had a reason, but she would by no means reveal it to me. It was impossible for her to speak to me freely, openly, to give me the communication I desired. I felt weary looking at her. The night was already late, and I could see and hear that Lestat had stolen into the wine cellar and taken our caskets, and I had a need to get away, and other needs besides, the need to kill and drink. But it wasn't that which made me weary. It was something else, something far worse. It was as if this night were only one of thousands of nights, world without end, night curving into night, to make a great arching line of which I couldn't see the end, a night in which I roamed alone, under cold, mindless stars. I think I turned away from her and put my hand to my eyes. I felt oppressed and weak suddenly. I think I was making some sound without my will. And then, on this vast and desolate landscape of night, where I was standing alone, and where Babette was only an illusion, I saw suddenly a possibility that I'd never considered before, a possibility from which I'd fled, wrapped as I was with the world, fallen into the senses of the vampire, in love with color and shape and sound, and singing, and softness, and infinite variation. Babette was moving, but I took no note of it. She was taking something from her pocket. Her great ring of household keys jingled there. She was moving up the steps. Let her go away, I was thinking. Creature of the devil, I whispered. Get thee behind me, Satan, I repeated. I turned to look at her now. She was frozen on the steps, with wide, suspicious eyes. She'd reached the lantern which hung on the wall, and she held it in her hands, just staring at me, holding it tight, like a valuable purse. You think I come from the devil? I asked her. She quickly moved her left fingers around the hook of the lantern, and with her right hand made the sign of the cross, the Latin words barely audible to me, and her face blanched, and her eyebrows rose when there was absolutely no change because of it. Did you expect me to go up in a puff of smoke? I asked her. I drew closer now, for I had gained detachment from her by virtue of my thoughts. And where would I go? I asked her. And where would I go? To hell, from whence I came. To the devil, from whom I came. I stood at the foot of the steps. Suppose I told you I know nothing of the devil. Suppose I told you that I do not even know if he exists. It was the devil I'd seen upon the landscape of my thoughts. It was the devil about whom I thought now. I turned away from her. She wasn't hearing me as you are now. She wasn't listening. I looked up at the stars. Lestat was ready. I knew it. It was as if he'd been ready there with the carriage for years, and she had stood upon the step for years. I had the sudden sensation my brother was there, and had been there for ages also, and that he was talking to me low in an excited voice, and what he was saying was desperately important, but it was going away from me as fast as he said it, like the rustle of rats in the rafters of an immense house. There was a scraping sound and a burst of light. I don't know whether I come from the devil or not. I don't know what I am. I shouted at Babette, my voice deafening in my own sensitive ears. I am to live to the end of the world, and I do not even know what I am. But the light flared before me. It was the lantern which she had lit with a match, and held now so I couldn't see her face. For a moment I could see nothing but the light, and then the great weight of the lantern struck me full force in the chest, and the glass shattered on the bricks, and the flames roared on my legs, in my face. Lestat was shouting from the darkness, put it out, idiot. It will consume you." And I felt something thrashing me wildly in my blindness. It was Lestat's jacket. I'd fallen helpless back against the pillar, helpless as much from the fire and the blow as from the knowledge that Babette meant to destroy me, as from the knowledge that I did not know what I was. All this happened in a matter of seconds. The fire was out, and I knelt in the dark, with my hands on the bricks. Lestat at the top of the stairs had Babette again, and I flew up after him, grabbing him about the neck and pulling him backwards. He turned on me, enraged, and kicked me, but I clung to him and pulled him down on top of me to the bottom. Babette was petrified. I saw her dark outline against the sky and the glint of light in her eyes. "Come on then," Lestat said, scrambling to his feet. Babette was putting her hand to her throat. My injured eyes strained to gather the light to see her. Her throat bled. "Remember," I said to her, "I might have killed you, or let him kill you. I did not. You called me devil. You are wrong." "Then you'd stopped Lestat just in time," said the boy. Yes, Lestat could kill and drink like a bolt of lightning, but I had saved only Babette's physical life. I was not to know that until later. In an hour and a half, Lestat and I were in New Orleans, the horses nearly dead from exhaustion, the carriage parked on a side street, a block from a new Spanish hotel. Lestat had an old man by the arm and was putting $50 into his hand. "Get us a suite," he directed him, "and order some champagne. Say it is for 2 gentlemen, and pay in advance. And when you come back, I'll have another 50 for you, and I'll be watching for you, I wager." His gleaming eyes held the man in thrall. I knew he'd kill him as soon as he returned with the hotel room keys, and he did. I sat in the carriage, watching wearily, as the man grew weaker and weaker, and finally died, his body collapsing like a sack of rocks in a doorway, as Lestat let him go. "Good night, sweet prince," said Lestat, "and here's your $50. And he shoved the money into his pocket, as if it were a capital joke. Now we slipped in the courtyard doors of the hotel and went up to the lavish parlor of our suite. Champagne glistened in a frosted bucket. 2 glasses stood on the silver tray. I knew Lestat would fill 1 glass and sit there staring at the pale yellow color, and I, a man in a trance, lay on the settee staring at him as if nothing he could do mattered. I have to leave him or die, I thought. It would be sweet to die, I thought. Yes, die. I wanted to die before. Now I wish to die. I saw it with such sweet clarity, such dead calm. "You're being morbid," Lestat said suddenly. "It's almost dawn." He pulled the lace curtains back, and I could see the rooftops under the dark blue sky, and above, the great constellation Orion. "Go kill," said Lestat, sliding up the glass. He stepped out of the sill, and I heard his feet land softly on the rooftop beside the hotel. He was going for the coffins, or at least one. My thirst rose in me like fever, and I followed him. My desire to die was constant, like a pure thought in the mind, devoid of emotion. Yet I needed to feed. I've indicated to you, I would not then kill people. I moved along the rooftop in search of rats. "But why? You've said Lestat shouldn't have made you start with people. Do you mean for you? It was an aesthetic choice, not a moral one. Had you asked me then, I would have told you it was aesthetic, that I wished to understand death in stages, that the death of an animal yielded such pleasure and experience to me that I had only begun to understand it, and wished to save the experience of human death for my mature understanding. But it was moral, because all aesthetic decisions are moral, really." "I don't understand," said the boy. "I thought aesthetic decisions could be completely immoral. What about the cliché of the artist who leaves his wife and children so he can paint? Or Nero playing the harp while Rome burned? Both were moral decisions. Both served a higher good in the mind of the artist. The conflict lies between the morals of the artist and the morals of society, not between aesthetics and morality. But often this isn't understood, and here comes the waste, the tragedy. An artist, stealing paints from a store, for example, imagines himself to have made an inevitable but immoral decision, and then he sees himself as fallen from grace. What follows is despair and petty irresponsibility, as if morality were a great glass world which can be utterly shattered by one act. But this was not my great concern then. I did not know these things then. I believed I killed animals for aesthetic reasons only, and I hedged against the great moral question of whether or not by my very nature I was damned. Because you see, though Lestat had never said anything about devils or hell to me. I believed I was damned when I went over to him, just as Judas must have believed it when he put the noose around his neck. You understand? The boy said nothing. He started to speak, but didn't. The color burned for a moment in blotches on his cheeks. "Were you?" he whispered. The vampire only sat there, smiling, a small smile that played on his lips like the light. The boy was staring at him now, as if he were just seeing him for the first time. "Perhaps," said the vampire, drawing himself up and crossing his legs, "we should take things one at a time. Perhaps I should go on with my story." "Yes, please," said the boy. I was agitated that night, as I told you. I had hedged against this question as a vampire, and now it completely overwhelmed me, and in that state, I had no desire to live. Well, this produced in me, as it can in humans, a craving for that which will satisfy at least physical desire. I think I used it as an excuse. I have told you what the kill means to vampires. You can imagine from what I've said the difference between a rat and a man. I went down into the street after Lestat and walked for blocks. The streets were muddy then, the actual blocks islands above the gutters, and the entire city so dark compared to the cities of today. The lights were as beacons in a black sea. Even with morning rising slowly, only the dormers and high porches of the houses were emerging from the dark, and to a mortal man, the narrow streets, I found, were like pitch. Am I damned? Am I from the devil? Is my very nature that of a devil? I was asking myself over and over, and if it is, why then do I revolt against it, tremble when Babette hurls a flaming lantern at me, turn away in disgust when Lestat kills? What have I become in becoming a vampire? Where am I to go? And all the while, as the death wish caused me to neglect my thirst grew hotter. My veins were veritable threads of pain in my flesh. My temples throbbed, and finally I could stand it no longer, torn apart by the wish to take no action, to starve, to wither in thought on the one hand, and driven to kill on the other. I stood in an empty, desolate street and heard the sound of a child crying. She was within. I drew close to the walls, trying in my habitual detachment only to understand the nature of her cry. She was weary and aching and utterly alone. She had been crying for so long now that soon she would stop from sheer exhaustion. I slipped my hand up under the heavy wooden shutter and pulled it so the bolt slipped. There she sat in the dark room beside a dead woman, a woman who'd been dead for some days. The room itself was cluttered with trunks and packages, as though a number of people had been packing to leave. But the mother lay half-clothed, her body already in decay, and no one else was there but the child. It was moments before she saw me, but when she did, she began to tell me that I must do something to help her mother. She was only 5 at most, and very thin, and her face was stained with dirt and tears. She begged me to help. They had to take a ship, she said, before the plague came. Their father was waiting. She began to shake her mother now and to cry, in the most pathetic and desperate way. And then she looked at me again and burst into the greatest flow of tears. You must understand that by now I was burning with physical need to drink. I could not have made it through another day without feeding, but there were alternatives. Rats abounded in the streets, and somewhere very near a dog was howling hopelessly. I might have fled the room had I chosen and fed and gotten back easily. But the question pounded in me, am I damned? If so, why do I feel such pity for her gaunt face? Why do I wish to touch her tiny, soft arms, hold her now on my knee as I am doing, feel her bend her head to my chest as I gently touch the satin hair? Why do I do this? If I am damned, I must want to kill her. I must want to make her nothing but food for a cursed existence, because being damned, I must hate her. And when I thought of this, I saw Babette's face contorted with hatred when she had held the lantern waiting to light it, and I saw Lestat in my mind and hated him, and I felt, yes, damned, and this is hell. And in that instant, I had bent down and driven hard into her soft, small neck, and hearing her tiny cry, whispered, even as I felt the hot blood on my lips, "It's only for a moment, and there'll be no more pain." But she was locked to me, and I was soon incapable of saying anything. For 4 years, I had not savored a human. For 4 years, I hadn't really known. And now I heard her heart in that terrible rhythm, and such a heart, not the heart of a man or an animal, but the rapid, tenacious heart of the child, beating harder and harder, refusing to die, beating like a tiny fist, beating on a door, crying, "I will not die. I will not die. I cannot die. I cannot die." I think I rose to my feet, still locked to her, the heart pulling my heart faster, with no hope of cease, the rich blood rushing too fast for me, the room reeling, and then, despite myself, I was staring over her bent head, her open mouth, down through the gloom at the mother's face, and through the half-mast lids, her eyes gleamed at me as if they were alive. I threw the child down. She lay like a jointless doll, and turning in blind horror of the mother to flee, I saw the window filled with a familiar shape. It was Lestat, who backed away from it now, laughing, his body bent as he danced in the mud street. "Louis, Louis," he taunted me, and pointed a long, bone-thin finger at me, as if to say he'd caught me in the act. And now he bounded over the sill, brushing me aside, and grabbed the mother's stinking body from the bed, and made to dance with her. "Good God," whispered the boy. "Yes, I might have said the same," said the vampire. He stumbled over the child as he pulled the mother along in widening circles, singing as he danced, her matted hair falling in her face, as her head snapped back and a black fluid poured out of her mouth. He threw her down. I was out of the window and running down the street, and he was running after me. "Are you afraid of me, Louis?" he shouted. "Are you afraid? The child's alive, Louis. You left her breathing. Shall I go back and make her a vampire? We could use her, Louis, and think of all the pretty dresses we could buy for her. Louis, wait, Louis, I'll go back for her if you say." And so he ran after me, all the way back to the hotel, all the way across the rooftops, where I hoped to lose him, until I leaped in the window of the parlor and turned in rage and slammed the window shut. He hit it, arms outstretched, like a bird who seeks to fly through glass, and shook the frame. I was utterly out of my mind. I went round and round the room, looking for some way to kill him. I pictured his body burned to a crisp on the roof below. Reason had altogether left me, so that I was consummate rage, and when he came through the broken glass, we fought as we'd never fought before. It was hell that stopped me, the thought of hell, of us being two souls in hell, that grappled in hatred. I lost my confidence, my purpose, my grip. I was down on the floor then, and he was standing over me, his eyes cold, though his chest heaved. "You're a fool, Louis," he said. His voice was calm. It was so calm it brought me around. "The sun's coming up," he said, his chest heaving slightly from the struggle, his eyes narrow as he looked at the window. I'd never seen him quite like this. The fight had got the better of him in some way, or something had. "Get in your coffin," he said to me, without even the slightest anger. "But tomorrow night, we talk." Well, I was more than slightly amazed. Lestat talk. I couldn't imagine this. Never had Lestat and I really talked. I think I have described to you with accuracy our sparring matches, our angry go-rounds. He was desperate for the money, for your houses, said the boy. Or was it that he was as afraid to be alone as you were? These questions occurred to me. It even occurred to me that Lestat meant to kill me, some way that I didn't know. You see, I wasn't sure then why I awoke each evening when I did, whether it was automatic, when the death-like sleep left me, and why it happened sometimes earlier than at other times. It was one of the things Lestat would not explain, and he was often up before me. He was my superior in all the mechanics, as I've indicated, and I shut the coffin that morning with a kind of despair. I should explain now, though, that the shutting of the coffin is always disturbing. It is rather like going under a modern anesthetic on an operating table. Even a casual mistake on the part of an intruder might mean death. But how could he have killed you? He couldn't have exposed you to the light. He couldn't have stood it himself. This is true, but rising before me, he might have nailed my coffin shut, or set it afire. The principal thing was, I didn't know what he might do, what he might know that I still did not know. But there was nothing to be done about it then, and with thoughts of the dead woman and child still in my brain, and the sun rising, I had no energy left to argue with him and lay down to miserable dreams. "You do dream," said the boy. "Often," said the vampire. "I wish sometimes that I did not. For such dreams, such long and clear dreams, I never had as a mortal, and such twisted nightmares I never had either. In my early days, these dreams so absorbed me that often it seemed I fought, waking as long as I could, and lay sometimes for hours, thinking of these dreams until the night was half gone, and dazed by them, I often wandered about seeking to understand their meaning. They were, in many ways, as elusive as the dreams of mortals. I dreamed of my brother, for instance, that he was near me in some state, between life and death, calling to me for help. And often I dreamed of Babette, and often, almost always, there was a great wasteland backdrop to my dreams, that wasteland of night I'd seen when cursed by Babette, as I've told you. It was as if all figures walked and talked on the desolate home of my damned soul. I don't remember what I dreamed that day, perhaps because I remember too well what Lestat and I discussed the following evening. I see you're anxious for that too. Well, as I've said, Lestat amazed me in his new calm, his thoughtfulness, but that evening I didn't wake to find him the same way, not at first. There were women in the parlor. The candles were a few, scattered on the small tables and the carved buffet, and Lestat had his arm around one woman and was kissing her. She was very drunk and very beautiful, a great drugged doll of a woman, with her careful coif falling slowly down on her bare shoulders and over her partially bared breasts. The other woman sat over a ruined supper table, drinking a glass of wine. I could see that the three of them had dined, Lestat pretending to dine. You would be surprised how people do not notice that a vampire is only pretending to eat, and the woman at the table was bored. All this put me in a fit of agitation. I did not know what Lestat was up to. If I went into the room, the woman would turn her attentions to me. And what was to happen, I couldn't imagine, except that Lestat meant for us to kill them both. The woman on the settee with him was already teasing about his kisses, his coldness, his lack of desire for her, and the woman at the table watched with black almond eyes that seemed to be filled with satisfaction. When Lestat rose and came to her, putting his hands on her bare white arms, she brightened. Bending now to kiss her, he saw me through the crack in the door, and his eyes just stared at me for a moment, and then he went on talking with the ladies. He bent down and blew out the candles on the table. "It's too dark in here," said the woman on the couch. "Leave us alone," said the other woman. Lestat sat down and beckoned her to sit in his lap, and she did, putting her left arm around his neck, her right hand smoothing back his yellow hair. "Your skin's icy," she said, recoiling slightly. "Not always," said Lestat, and then he buried his face in the flesh of her neck. I was watching all this with fascination. Lestat was masterfully clever and utterly vicious, but I didn't know how clever he was, until he sank his teeth into her now, his thumb pressing down on her throat, his other arm locking her tight, so that he drank his fill without the other woman even knowing. "Your friend has no head for wine," he said, slipping out of the chair and seating the unconscious woman there, her arms folded under her face on the table. "She's stupid," said the other woman, who had gone to the window and had been looking out at the lights. New Orleans was then a city of many low buildings, as you probably know, and on such clear nights as this, the lamplit streets were beautiful from the high windows of this new Spanish hotel, and the stars of those days hung low over such dim light as they do at sea. "I can warm that cold skin of yours better than she can." She turned to Lestat, and I must confess I was feeling some relief that he would now take care of her as well, but he planned nothing so simple. "Do you think so?" he said to her. He took her hand, and she said, "Why, you're warm." "You mean the blood had warmed him," said the boy. "Oh, yes," said the vampire. "After killing, a vampire is as warm as you are now." And he started to resume. Then, glancing at the boy, he smiled. As I was saying, Lestat now held the woman's hand in his, and said that the other had warmed him. His face, of course, was flushed, much altered. He drew her close now, and she kissed him, remarking through her laughter that he was a veritable furnace of passion. "Ah, but the price is high," he said to her, affecting sadness. "Your pretty friend." He shrugged his shoulders. "I exhausted her." And he stood back as if inviting the woman to walk to the table, and she did, a look of superiority on her small features. She bent down to see her friend, but then lost interest, until she saw something. It was a napkin. It had caught the last drops of blood from the wound in the throat. She picked it up, straining to see it in the darkness. "Take down your hair," said Lestat softly, and she dropped it, indifferent, and took down the last tresses so that her hair fell blonde and wavy down her back. "Soft," he said, "so soft. I picture you that way, lying on a bed of satin." "Such things you say," she scoffed and turned her back on him playfully. "Do you know what manner of bed?" he asked. And she laughed and said his bed. She could imagine. She looked back at him as he advanced, and never once looking away from her, he gently tipped the body of her friend so that it fell backwards from the chair and lay with staring eyes upon the floor. The woman gasped. She scrambled away from the corpse, nearly upsetting a small end table. The candle went over and went out. "Put out the light, and then put out the light," Lestat said softly. And then he took her into his arms like a struggling moth and sank his teeth into her. "But what were you thinking as you watched?" asked the boy. "Did you want to stop him the way you wanted to stop him from killing Frenier?" "No," said the vampire. "I could not have stopped him. And you must understand, I knew that he killed humans every night. Animals gave him no satisfaction whatsoever. Animals were to be banked on when all else failed, but never to be chosen. If I felt any sympathy for the women, it was buried deep in my own turmoil. I still felt in my chest the little hammer heart of that starving child. I still burned with the questions of my own divided nature. I was angry that Lestat had staged this show for me, waiting till I woke to kill the women, and I wondered again if I might somehow break loose from him, and felt both hatred and my own weakness more than ever. Meantime, he propped their lovely corpses at the table and went about the room lighting all the candles until it blazed as if for a wedding. "Come in, Louis," he said. "I would have arranged an escort for you, but I know what a man you are about choosing your own. Pity Mademoiselle Frenier likes to hurl flaming lanterns. It makes a party unwieldy, don't you think? Especially for a hotel." He seated the blonde-haired girl so that her head lay to one side against the damask back of the chair, and the darker woman lay with her chin resting just above her breasts. This one had blanched, and her features had a rigid look to them already, as though she was one of those women in whom the fire of personality makes beauty. But the other looked only as if she slept, and I was not sure that she was even dead. Lestat had made 2 gashes, one in her throat and one above her left breast, and both still bled freely. He lifted her wrist now, and slitting it with a knife, filled 2 wine glasses and bade me to sit down. "I'm leaving you," I said to him at once. "I wish to tell you that now." "I thought as much," he answered, sitting back in the chair, "and I thought as well that you would make a flowery announcement. Tell me what a monster I am, what a vulgar fiend. I make no judgments upon you. I'm not interested in you. I am interested in my own nature now, and I've come to believe I can't trust you to tell me the truth about it. You use knowledge for personal power," I told him. And I suppose, in the manner of many people making such an announcement, I was not looking to him for an honest response. I was not looking to him at all. I was mainly listening to my own words. But now I saw that his face was once again the way it had been when he'd said we would talk. He was listening to me. I was suddenly at a loss. I felt that gulf between us as painfully as ever. "Why did you become a vampire?" I blurted out. "And why such a vampire as you are, vengeful and delighting in taking human life even when you have no need? This girl, why did you kill her when one would have done? And why did you frighten her so before you killed her? And why have you propped her here in some grotesque manner, as if tempting the gods to strike you down for your blasphemy?" All this he listened to without speaking, and in the pause that followed, I again felt at a loss. Lestat's eyes were large and thoughtful. I'd seen them that way before, but I couldn't remember when, certainly not when talking to me. "What do you think a vampire is?" he asked me sincerely. "I don't pretend to know. You pretend to know. What is it?" I asked. And to this he answered nothing. It was as if he sensed the insincerity of it, the spite. He just sat there looking at me with the same still expression. Then I said, "I know that after leaving you, I shall try to find out. I'll travel the world, if I have to find other vampires. I know they must exist. I don't know of any reasons why they shouldn't exist in great numbers. And I'm confident I shall find vampires who have more in common with me than I with you. Vampires who understand knowledge as I do and have used their superior vampire nature to learn secrets of which you don't even dream. If you haven't told me everything, I shall find things out for myself or from them when I find them." He shook his head. "Louis," he said, "you are in love with your mortal nature. You chase after the phantoms of your former self. Freniere, his sister. These are images for you of what you were and what you still long to be. And in your romance with mortal life, you're dead to your vampire nature." I objected to this at once. My vampire nature has been for me the greatest adventure of my life. All that went before it was confused, clouded. I went through mortal life like a blind man, groping from solid object to solid object. It was only when I became a vampire that I respected for the first time all of life. I never saw a living, pulsing human being until I was a vampire. I never knew what life was until it ran out in a red gush over my lips, my hands. I found myself staring at the two women, the darker one now turning a terrible shade of blue. The blonde was breathing. "She's not dead," I said to him suddenly. "I know. Let her alone," he said. He lifted her wrist and made a new gash by the scab of the other and filled his glass. "All that you say makes sense," he said to me, taking a drink. "You are an intellect. I've never been. What I've learned from listening to men talk, not from books. I never went to school long enough, but I'm not stupid, and you must listen to me, because you are in danger. You do not know your vampire nature. You are like an adult who, looking back on his childhood, realizes that he never appreciated it. You cannot, as a man, go back to the nursery and play with your toys, asking for the love and care to be showered on you again, simply because now you know their worth. So it is with you and mortal nature. You've given it up. You no longer look through a glass darkly, but you cannot pass back to the world of human warmth with your new eyes." "I know that well enough," I said. "But what is it that is our nature? If I can live from the blood of animals, why should I not live from the blood of animals, rather than go through the world bringing misery and death to human creatures?" "Does it bring you happiness?" he asked. "You wander through the night, feeding on rats like a pauper, and then moon at Babette's window, filled with care, yet helpless as the goddess who came by night to watch Endymion sleep and could not have him. And suppose you could hold her in your arms, and she would look on you without horror or disgust. What then? A few short years to watch her suffer every prick of mortality, and then die before your eyes? Does this give happiness? This is insanity, Louis. This is vain. And what truly lies before you is vampire nature, which is killing. For I guarantee you that if you walk the streets tonight and strike down a woman as rich and beautiful as Babette, and suck her blood until she drops at your feet. You will have no hunger left for Babette's profile in the candlelight, or for listening by the window for the sound of her voice. You will be filled, Louis, as you were meant to be, with all the life that you can hold, and you will have hunger when that's gone for the same, and the same, and the same. The red in this glass will be just as red, the roses on the wallpaper just as delicately drawn, and you'll see the moon the same way, and the flicker of a candle. And with that same sensibility that you cherish, you will see death in all its beauty, life as it is only known on the very point of death. Don't you understand that, Louis? You alone of all creatures can see death that way with impunity. You, alone, under the rising moon, can strike like the hand of God. He sat back now and drained the glass, and his eyes moved over the unconscious woman. Her breasts heaved, and her eyebrows knit as if she were coming around. A moan escaped her lips. He'd never spoken such words to me before, and I had not thought him capable of it. Vampires are killers, he said now. Predators, whose all-seeing eyes were meant to give them detachment, the ability to see a human life in its entirety, not with any mawkish sorrow, but with a thrilling satisfaction in being the end of that life, in having a hand in the divine plan. That is how you see it, I protested. The girl moaned again. Her face was very white. Her head rolled against the back of the chair. That is the way it is, he answered. You talk of finding other vampires. Vampires are killers. They don't want you or your sensibility. They'll see you coming long before you see them, and they'll see your flaw. And, distrusting you, they'll seek to kill you. They'd seek to kill you, even if you were like me, because they are lone predators and seek for companionship no more than cats in the jungle. They're jealous of their secret and of their territory, and if you find one or more of them together, it will be for safety only, and one will be the slave of the other, the way you are of me. I'm not your slave, I said to him. But even as he spoke, I realized I'd been his slave all along. That's how vampires increase, through slavery. How else? He asked. He took the girl's wrist again, and she cried out as the knife cut. She opened her eyes slowly as he held her wrist over the glass. She blinked and strained to keep them open. It was as if a veil covered her eyes. You're tired, aren't you? He asked her. She gazed at him as if she couldn't really see him. Tired, he said, now leaning close and staring into her eyes. You want to sleep? Yes, she moaned softly, and he picked her up and took her into the bedroom. Our coffins rested on the carpet and against the wall. There was a velvet-draped bed. Lestat did not put her on the bed. He lowered her slowly into his coffin. What are you doing? I asked him, coming to the doorsill. The girl was looking around, like a terrified child. No, she was moaning. And then, as he closed the lid, she screamed. She continued to scream within the coffin. Why do you do this, Lestat? I asked. I like to do it, he said. I enjoy it. He looked at me. I don't say that you have to enjoy it. Take your aesthete's tastes to purer things. Kill them swiftly if you will, but do it. Learn that you're a killer. Ah! He threw up his hands in disgust. The girl had stopped screaming. Now he drew up a little curved-legged chair beside the coffin and crossing his legs, he looked at the coffin lid. His was a black, varnished coffin, not a pure rectangular box as they are now, but tapered at both ends and widest where the corpse might lay his hands upon his chest. It suggested the human form. It opened, and the girl sat up astonished, wild-eyed, her lips blue and trembling. "Lie down, love," he said to her, and pushed her back, and she lay, near hysterical, staring up at him. "You're dead, love," he said to her, and she screamed and turned desperately in the coffin like a fish, as if her body could escape through the sides, through the bottom. "It's a coffin, she cried. "Let me out." "But we all must lie in coffins eventually," he said to her. "Lie still, love. This is your coffin. Most of us never get to know what it feels like. You know what it feels like," he said to her. I couldn't tell whether she was listening or not, or just going wild. But she saw me in the doorway, and then she lay still, looking at Lestat and then at me. "Help me," she said to me. Lestat looked at me. "I expected you to feel these things instinctually, as I did," he said. "When I gave you that first kill, I thought you would hunger for the next and the next, that you would go to each human life as if to a full cup, the way I had. But you didn't. And all this time I suppose I kept from straightening you out because you were best weaker. I'd watch you playing shadow in the night, staring at the falling rain, and I'd think, he's easy to manage, he's simple. But you're weak, Louis. You're a mark, for vampires and now for humans alike. This thing with Babette has exposed us both. It's as if you want us both to be destroyed." "I can't stand to watch what you're doing," I said, turning my back. The girl's eyes were burning into my flesh. She lay, all the time he spoke, staring at me. "You can stand it," he said. "I saw you last night with that child. You're a vampire, the same as I am." He stood up and came towards me, but the girl rose again, and he turned to shove her down. "Do you think we should make her a vampire? Share our lives with her?" he asked. Instantly I said, "No." "Why? Because she's nothing but a whore?" he asked. "A damned expensive whore at that," he said. "Can she live now? Or has she lost too much?" I asked him. "Touching," he said. "She can't live." "Then kill her." She began to scream. He just sat there. I turned around. He was smiling, and the girl had turned her face to the satin and was sobbing. Her reason had almost entirely left her. She was crying and praying. She was praying to the Virgin to save her. Her hands over her face now over her head, the wrist smearing blood in her hair and on the satin. I bent over the coffin. She was dying, it was true. Her eyes were burning, but the tissue around them was already bluish, and now she smiled. "You won't let me die, will you?" she whispered. "You'll save me." Lestat reached over and took her wrist. "But it's too late, love," he said. "Look at your wrist, your breast." And then he touched the wound in her throat. She put her hands to her throat and gasped, her mouth open, the scream strangled. I stared at Lestat. I could not understand why he did this. His face was as smooth as mine is now, more animated for the blood, but cold and without emotion. He did not leer like a stage villain, nor hunger for her suffering, as if the cruelty fed him. He simply watched her. "I never meant to be bad," she was crying. "I only did what I had to do. You won't let this happen to me. You'll let me go. I can't die like this. I can't. She was sobbing, the sobs dry and thin. You'll let me go. I have to go to the priest. You'll let me go. But my friend is a priest, said Lestat, smiling, as if he'd just thought of it as a joke. This is your funeral, dear. You see, you were at a dinner party and you died, but God has given you another chance to be absolved. Don't you see? Tell him your sins. She shook her head at first, and then she looked at me again with those pleading eyes. Is it true? She whispered. Well, said Lestat, I suppose you're not contrite, dear. I shall have to shut the lid. Stop this, Lestat, I shouted at him. The girl was screaming again, and I could not stand the sight of it any longer. I bent down to her and took her hand. I can't remember my sins, she said, just as I was looking at her wrist, resolved to kill her. You mustn't try. Tell God only that you are sorry, I said, and then you'll die, and it will be over. She lay back, and her eyes shut. I sank my teeth into her wrist and began to suck her dry. She stirred once as if dreaming and said a name, and then, when I felt her heartbeat reach that hypnotic slowness, I drew back from her, dizzy, confused for the moment, my hands reaching for the door frame. I saw her as if in a dream. The candles glared in the corner of my eye. I saw her lying utterly still, and Lestat sat composed beside her, like a mourner. His face was still. Louis, he said to me, don't you understand? Peace will only come to you when you can do this every night of your life. There is nothing else. But this is everything. His voice was almost tender as he spoke, and he rose and put both his hands on my shoulders. I walked into the parlor, shying away from his touch, but not resolute enough to push him off. Come with me out into the streets. It's late. You haven't drunk enough. Let me show you what you are. Really. Forgive me if I bungled it, left too much to nature. Come. I can't bear it, Lestat, I said to him. You chose your companion badly. But Louis, he said, you haven't tried. The vampire stopped. He was studying the boy, and the boy, astonished, said nothing. It was true what he'd said. I had not drunk enough, and shaken by the girl's fear, I let him lead me out of the hotel, down the back stairs. People were coming now from the Conde Street ballroom, and the narrow street was jammed. There were supper parties in the hotels, and the planter families were lodged in town in great numbers, and we passed through them like a nightmare. My agony was unbearable. Never since I was a human being had I felt such mental pain. It was because all of Lestat's words had made sense to me. I knew peace only when I killed, only for that minute. And there was no question in my mind that the killing of anything less than a human being brought nothing but a vague longing, the discontent which had brought me close to humans, to watch their lives through glass. I was no vampire, and in my pain I asked irrationally, like a child, could I not return? Could I not be human again? Even as the blood of that girl was warm in me, and I felt that physical thrill and strength, I asked that question. The faces of humans passed me like candle flames, in the night dancing on dark waves. I was sinking into the darkness. I was weary of longing. I was turning around and around in the street, looking at the stars and thinking, yes, it's true. I know what he is saying is true, that when I kill, there is no longing, and I can't bear this truth. I can't bear it. Suddenly, there was one of those arresting moments. The street was utterly quiet. We had strayed far from the main part of the old town, and were near the ramparts. There were no lights, only the fire in a window and the far-off sound of people laughing. But no one here, no one near us. I could feel the breeze suddenly from the river and the hot air of the night rising, and Lestat near me, so still he might have been made of stone. Over the long, low row of pointed roofs were the massive shapes of oak trees, in the dark, great swaying forms of myriad sounds under the low-hung stars. The pain for the moment was gone. The confusion was gone. I closed my eyes and heard the wind and the sound of water flowing softly, swiftly in the river. It was enough for one moment, and I knew that it would not endure, that it would fly away from me like something torn out of my arms, and I would fly after it, more desperately lonely than any creature under God, to get it back. And then a voice beside me rumbled deep in the sound of the night, a drum beat as the moment ended, saying, "Do what it is your nature to do. This is but a taste of it. Do what it is your nature to do." And the moment was gone. I stood like the girl in the parlor in the hotel, dazed and ready for the slightest suggestion. I was nodding at Lestat as he nodded at me. "Pain is terrible for you," he said. "You feel it like no other creature because you are a vampire. You don't want it to go on." "No," I answered him. "I'll feel as I felt with her, wed to her and weightless, caught as if by a dance. That and more." His hand tightened on mine. "Don't turn away from it. Come with me." He led me quickly through the street, turning every time I hesitated, his hand out for mine, a smile on his lips, his presence as marvelous to me as the night he'd come in my mortal life and told me we would be vampires. "Evil is a point of view," he whispered now. "We are immortal, and what we have before us are the rich feasts that conscience cannot appreciate, and mortal men cannot know without regret. God kills, and so shall we. Indiscriminately, he takes the richest and the poorest, and so shall we. For no creatures under God are as we are, none so like him as ourselves. Dark angels not confined to the stinking limits of hell, but wandering his earth and all its kingdoms. I want a child tonight. I am like a mother. I want a child." I should have known what he meant. I did not. He had me mesmerized, enchanted. He was playing to me as he had when I was mortal. He was leading me. He was saying, "Your pain will end." We'd come to a street of lighted windows. It was a place of rooming houses, sailors, flatboatmen. We entered a narrow door, and then, in a hollow stone passage in which I could hear my own breath like the wind. He crept along the wall until his shadow leapt out in the light of a doorway, beside the shadow of another man, their heads bent together, their whispers like the rustling of dry leaves. "What is it?" I drew near him as he came back, afraid suddenly this exhilaration in me would die. I saw again that nightmare landscape I'd seen when I spoke with Babette. I felt the chill of loneliness, the chill of guilt. "She's there," he said. "Your wounded one, your daughter." "What do you say? What are you talking about?" "You've saved her," he whispered. "I knew it. You left the window wide on her and her dead mother, and people passing in the street brought her here." "The child, the little girl," I gasped. But he was already leading me through the door to stand at the end of the long ward of wooden beds, each with a child, beneath a narrow white blanket one candle at the end of the ward, where a nurse bent over a small desk. We walked down the aisle between the rows. Starving children, orphans, he said. Children of plague and fever. He stopped. I saw the little girl lying in the bed, and then the man was coming, and he was whispering with Lestat. Such care for the sleeping little ones. Someone in another room was crying. The nurse rose and hurried away. And now the doctor bent and wrapped the child in the blanket. Lestat had taken money from his pocket and set it on the foot of the bed. The doctor was saying how glad he was. We'd come for her, how most of them were orphans. They came in on the ships, sometimes orphans too young, even to tell which body was that of their mother. He thought Lestat was the father. And in moments, Lestat was running through the streets with her, the white of the blanket gleaming against his dark coat and cape. And even to my expert vision, as I ran after him, it seemed sometimes as if the blanket flew through the night, with no one holding it. A shifting shape traveling on the wind, like a leaf stood upright and sent scurrying along a passage, trying to gain the wind all the while and truly take flight. I caught him finally as we approached the lamps near the Place d'Armes. The child lay pale on his shoulder, her cheeks still full like plums, though she was drained and near death. She opened her eyes, or rather, the lids slid back, and beneath the long curling lashes, I saw a streak of white. Lestat, what are you doing? Where are you taking her? I demanded. But I knew too well. He was heading for the hotel and meant to take her into our room. The corpses were as we left them, one neatly set in the coffin, as if an undertaker had already attended her, the other in her chair at the table. Lestat brushed past them, as if he didn't see them, while I watched him in fascination. The candles had all burned down, and the only light was that of the moon and the street. I could see his iced and gleaming profile as he set the child down on the pillow. Come here, Louis. You haven't fed enough. I know you haven't, he said, with that same calm, convincing voice he had used skillfully all evening. He held my hand in his own warm and tight. See her, Louis, how plump and sweet she looks, as if even death can't take her freshness. The will to live is too strong. He might make a sculpture of her tiny lips and rounded hands, but he cannot make her fade. You remember the way you wanted her when you saw her in that room? I resisted him. I didn't want to kill her. I hadn't wanted to last night. And then suddenly, I remembered two conflicting things and was torn in agony. I remembered the powerful beating of her heart against mine, and I hungered for it so badly, I turned my back on her in the bed and would have rushed out of the room had not Lestat held me fast. And I remembered her mother's face, and that moment of horror when I'd dropped the child and he'd come into the room. But he wasn't mocking me now. He was confusing me. You want her, Louis, don't you see? Once you've taken her, then you can take whomever you wish. You wanted her last night, but you weakened, and that's why she's not dead. I could feel it was true, what he said. I could feel again that ecstasy of being pressed to her, her little heart going and going. She's too strong for me. Her heart, it wouldn't give up, I said to him. Is she so strong? He smiled. He drew me close to him. Take her, Louis. I know you want her. And I did. I drew close to the bed now and just watched her. Her chest barely moved with her breath, and one small hand was tangled in her long, gold hair. I couldn't bear it, looking at her, wanting her not to die, and wanting her. And the more I looked at her, the more I could taste her skin, feel my arm sliding under her back and pulling her up to me. Feel her soft neck. Soft, soft. That's what she was. So soft. I tried to tell myself it was best for her to die. What was to become of her? But these were lying thoughts. I wanted her. And so I took her in my arms and held her, her burning cheek on mine, her hair falling down over my wrists and brushing my eyelids, the sweet perfume of a child strong and pulsing in spite of sickness and death. She moaned now, stirred in her sleep, and that was more than I could bear. I'd kill her before I'd let her wake and know it. I went into her throat and heard Lestat saying to me strangely, "Just a little tear. It's just a little throat." And I obeyed him. I won't tell you again what it was like, except that it caught me up, just as it had done before, and as killing always does, only more, so that my knees bent, and I half lay on the bed, sucking her dry, that heart pounding again that would not slow, would not give up. And suddenly, as I went on and on, the instinctual part of me, waiting for the slowing of the heart, which would mean death, Lestat wrenched me from her. "But she's not dead," I whispered. But it was over. The furniture of the room emerged from the darkness. I sat stunned, staring at her, too weak to move, my head rolling back against the headboard of the bed, my hands pressing down on the velvet spread. Lestat was snatching her up, talking to her, saying a name. "Claudia, Claudia, listen to me. Come round, Claudia." He was carrying her now out of the bedroom into the parlor, and his voice was so soft I barely heard him. "You're ill, do you hear me? You must do as I tell you to get well." And then, in the pause that followed, I came to my senses. I realized what he was doing, that he had cut his wrist and given it to her, and she was drinking. "That's it, dear, more," he was saying to her. "You must drink it to get well." "Damn you," I shouted, and he hissed at me with blazing eyes. He sat on the settee with her locked to his wrist. I saw her white hand clutching at his sleeve, and I could see his chest heaving for breath, and his face contorted, the way I'd never seen it. He let out a moan and whispered again to her to go on, and when I moved from the threshold, he glared at me again, as if to say, "I'll kill you." "But why, Lestat?" I whispered to him. He was trying now to push her off, and she wouldn't let go. With her fingers locked around his fingers and arm, she held the wrist to her mouth, a growl coming out of her. "Stop, stop," he said to her. He was clearly in pain. He pulled back from her and held her shoulders with both hands. She tried desperately to reach his wrist with her teeth, but she couldn't. And then she looked at him with the most innocent astonishment. He stood back, his hand out lest she move. Then he clapped a handkerchief to his wrist and backed away from her, towards the bell rope. He pulled it sharply, his eyes still fixed on her. "What have you done, Lestat?" I asked him. "What have you done?" I stared at her. She sat composed, revived, filled with life. No sign of pallor or weakness in her. Her legs stretched out straight on the damask. Her white gown soft and thin, like an angel's gown around her small form. She was looking at Lestat. "Not me," he said to her. "Ever again. Do you understand? But I'll show you what to do." When I tried to make him look at me and answer me as to what he was doing, he shook me off. He gave me such a blow with his arm that I hit the wall. Someone was knocking now. I knew what he meant to do. Once more, I tried to reach out for him, but he spun so fast, I didn't even see him hit me. When I did see him, I was sprawled in the chair, and he was opening the door. "Yes, come in, please. There's been an accident," he said to the young slave boy. And then, shutting the door, he took him from behind so that the boy never knew what happened. And even as he knelt over the body drinking, he beckoned for the child, who slid from the couch and went down on her knees and took the wrist offered her, quickly pushing back the cuff of the shirt. She gnawed first, as if she meant to devour his flesh, and then Lestat showed her what to do. He sat back and let her have the rest, his eye on the boy's chest, so that when the time came, he bent forward and said, "No more. He's dying. You must never drink after the heart stops, or you'll be sick again, sick to death. Do you understand?" But she'd had enough, and she sat next to him, their backs against the legs of the settee, their legs stretched out on the floor. The boy died in seconds. I felt weary and sickened, as if the night had lasted 1,000 years. I sat there watching them, the child drawing close to Lestat now, snuggling near him as he slipped his arm around her, though his indifferent eyes remained fixed on the corpse. Then he looked up at me. "Where is Mama?" asked the child softly. She had a voice equal to her physical beauty, clear like a little silver bell. It was sensual. She was sensual. Her eyes were as wide and clear as Babette's. You understand that I was barely aware of what all this meant. I knew what it might mean, but I was aghast. Now, Lestat stood up and scooped her from the floor and came towards me. "She's our daughter," he said. "You're going to live with us now." He beamed at her, but his eyes were cold, as if it were all a horrible joke. Then he looked at me, and his face had conviction. He pushed her towards me. I found her on my lap, my arms around her, feeling again how soft she was, how plump her skin was, like the skin of warm fruit, plums warmed by sunlight. Her huge, luminescent eyes were fixed on me with trusting curiosity. "This is Louis, and I am Lestat," he said to her, dropping down beside her. She looked about and said that it was a pretty room, very pretty, but she wanted her mama. He had his comb out and was running it through her hair, holding the locks so as not to pull with the comb. Her hair was untangling and becoming like satin. She was the most beautiful child I'd ever seen, and now she glowed with the cold fire of a vampire. Her eyes were a woman's eyes. I could see it already. She would become white and spare like us, but not lose her shape. I understood now what Lestat had said about death, what he meant. I touched her neck, where the 2 red puncture wounds were bleeding just a little. I took Lestat's handkerchief from the floor and touched it to her neck. "Your mama's left you with us. She wants you to be happy," he was saying with that same immeasurable confidence. "She knows we can make you very happy." "I want some more," she said, turning to the corpse on the floor. "No, not tonight. Tomorrow night," said Lestat, and he went to take the lady out of his coffin. The child slid off my lap, and I followed her. She stood watching as Lestat put the 2 ladies and the slave boy into the bed. He brought the covers up to their chins. "Are they sick?" asked the child. "Yes, Claudia," he said. "They're sick and they're dead. You see, they die when we drink from them." He came towards her and swung her up into his arms again. We stood there with her between us. I was mesmerized by her transformed, by her every gesture. She was not a child any longer. She was a vampire child. Now, Louis was going to leave us, said Lestat, his eyes moving from my face to hers. He was going to go away, but now he's not, because he wants to stay and take care of you and make you happy. He looked at me. You're not going, are you, Louis? You bastard, I whispered to him. You fiend. Such language in front of your daughter, he said. I'm not your daughter, she said with the silvery voice. I'm my mama's daughter. No, dear, not anymore, he said to her. He glanced at the window, and then he shut the bedroom door behind us and turned the key in the lock. You're our daughter, Louis's daughter and my daughter, do you see? Now, whom should you sleep with, Louis or me? And then, looking at me, he said, perhaps you should sleep with Louis. After all, when I'm tired, I'm not so kind. And this is where we pause our tale. Thank you for letting me be a part of your journey to the land of sleep. If you've enjoyed our time together, countless other journeys await in previous episodes, ready to accompany you into the realm of dreams. So, as we close the book on our story this evening, I wish you a night filled with serene dreams and restful sleep. Good night, until we meet again in another tale. Rest well.